welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. President Trump, well, even more changes in his White House. New chief of staff and the mooch, he is history. Let's go now live here to Megan Hughes. She brings us the latest in yet another turbulent day in the Trump administration.
The retired Marine four-star general just took over as White House chief of staff at 9:30 this morning. Hours later, Scaramucci was out.
General John Kelly immediately shaking up the White House hours after being sworn in. The White House announcing Anthony Scaramucci on his way out as communications director after just 10 days. President Donald Trump tweeting this morning, "No White House chaos," welcoming Kelly to the table at his first cabinet meeting as chief of staff.
We all know him, we respect him, admire what he's done.
In a statement, the White House saying Scaramucci felt it was best to give Kelly a clean slate and the ability to build his own team. Scaramucci unloaded on several senior White House officials in a blunt interview with The New Yorker last week, calling then White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus a bleeping paranoid schizophrenic, lobbing a crude insult at strategist Steve Bannon, and threatening to fire essentially the entire White House communications staff over recent leaks, saying, "They'll all be fired by me. I fired one guy the other day. I have 3 to 4 people I'll fire tomorrow." The New Yorker's Ryan Lizza, who conducted the interview, telling CNN at the time,
the White House was already deeply factionalized, and it was like putting Anthony Scaramucci in that job was like throwing a grenade into an ongoing civil war.
The president certainly felt that Anthony's comments were inappropriate for a person in that position.
The new White House press secretary Sarah Sanders took over from Sean Spicer the same day Scaramucci was hired.
General Kelly, I think, will bring a new structure to the White House and discipline and strength, and we're all really excited to work with him.
Sources inside the White House tell ABC News that Scaramucci asked to be moved to a position at the Export-Import Bank. The White House says he has no role there. Reporting live in Washington, I'm Megan Hughes, ABC News. Now back to you.
Tough few days for the mooch. Thank you, Megan. And now some interesting news that just broke about Mr. Kelly and James Comey. CNN reporting that General Kelly, he called James Comey right after Comey was fired and said he was so upset General Kelly, considered resigning over it. One source also said Comey told Kelly, "Don't step down." A lot to unpack here. Let's bring in our panel. Jeannie Zaino, professor of political science at Iona College, also senior advisor at the consulting firm Applied Techonomics. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Vinny Bellazio, campaign manager for Pataki for President, also managed the New York City mayoral campaign of Joe Lhota, back in the news now, and he did that back in 2013. Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. By the way, we should stop Andrew. It's just the charade of putting together a show at 10 o'clock every morning because some grenade goes off, at least politically speaking, late every afternoon, and then you just throw it on and start over. But I think this might be a good turn of events for the White House. Now, there's so much here from the human drama. I mean, you can almost feel sympathy for Scaramucci even after that insane conversation he had with Ryan Lizza, but nonetheless, if they let Kelly apply discipline and be the focal point that people have to go through, this White House will look back at the last day of July as maybe a turning point for an administration that certainly was on its heels after a tumultuous 6 months.
Yeah, but there's one big word in that statement that you just said. It's 2 letters, and it's if. And the real question here is, will Donald Trump actually allow Kelly to run the White House the way a chief of staff is supposed to run the White House? I mean, so far so good. It would seem as though the president's being somewhat more deferential than he had been in the past, but there's no reason to think that anybody can bring this president under control, at least for too long, so we'll see where it goes. And I guess one thing I'll be looking for is, when's the next time the president tweets? And is it a standard Trump tweet, or is it a more conventional tweet? I think that'll give us some insight too.
And does anyone really believe, Vincent, that Ivanka or Jared are going to first check with, the general here if they can go talk to dad or a father-in-law? I mean, there's so many unique dynamics to this, but he has created and has said repeatedly he likes when there's competition between staff members. He says there's no chaos, but a majority of Americans polled today says 52% say they believe the White House is in chaos. Not if they think they're doing a good or bad job. Those numbers were historically bad, but they believe there's utter chaos right now, and it seems, to Andrew's point, the president thrives on it. Do you think he'll listen because he likes the guys with the medals on their chests?
Well, Donald Trump thrives on it, but the presidency doesn't. And it's been a very unstructured, very undisciplined 6-7 months now. Will the daughter, will Ivanka, will Jared have access? Absolutely. But when it comes to, hopefully, matters of state, they will go through this general, and he does, I believe, defer, as Andrew and I were talking before, defer to men with medals on their chest. And this general doesn't need this job. I mean, he's not making his name. He served this country. Right. He's a 4-star Marine. I mean, he has all the respect in the world. And if he leaves, this is going to spell trouble for the president. The president has already been through, he will be going on his 4th communications director. He's been through 2 press secretaries. This is his 2nd chief of staff. He's kind of out of options, and we've seen over the weekend the way the establishment now through the Senate, the Speaker of the House, even the Wall Street Journal, is now starting to push back and rise up against him. So he's kind of put himself on an island. He needs to listen to this general if he wants to have a somewhat successful presidency. It's not off to a good start, but if he doesn't, it'll continue the chaos and probably end his presidency prematurely.
And you know, right after the news broke, the story also came out about this conversation, Jeannie, that reportedly took place between General Kelly and one of, I'd say, only a couple people that Trump hates more on this planet than Hillary Clinton, and that's James Comey, okay? The idea that Kelly reached out to Comey and said it's outrageous, more so than the termination, how it was handled, that reportedly Comey in Los Angeles for FBI business talking to people on a monitor behind him was displaying the news that he had just been let go, and no one had even given the courtesy to let him know. People in the room had to let him know. Apparently, if you believe this, not only did it infuriate General Kelly, but he even contemplated verbally, supposedly, about leaving as well. Those kind of things don't sit well with Trump. Do you believe that he's right, that Trump realizes he's almost out of options now? That if he does this and he blows this thing up as well, where can he go next?
You know, I wish I could be optimistic, and I hope that General Kelly is able to bring order to this chaos, but that doesn't depend at all on General Kelly. It depends on one person, and that's Donald Trump, and he thrives on chaos. So 2 things. Andrew mentioned he's going to watch for his next tweets. Kelly is appointed on Friday. He is tweeting that the Senate Republicans are fools over the weekend because of what happened with healthcare. He's also threatening to cut subsidies, $7 billion for over 6 million people. He's going to destroy the Affordable Care Act to force them to go back to the table on this. That is hardly something that you do if you're disciplined and structured. So I don't think we've seen any signs
and there's
since
no,
the appointment.
in 70 plus years of life, there's been never a window of time of discipline that he can hold on to.
And to your point, I think he's going to be very unhappy to hear that Kelly threatened to resign, if that's true. I mean, he may deny it's true, but if it's true, that's not going to sit well with Donald Trump.
And reportedly, they learned about it right after the announcement that Kelly had been formally put in that position and obviously had pushed the mooch. And I want to go back to Republican establishment politics in a second with Vincent, but first, Dominic, Scaramucci. Now, I mean, it was literally a week. I mean, think about what he does. He comes in with a blowtorch, comes off as glib in the press conference. Most people said compared to what they had seen, you know, from both Spicer and then Huckabee, he at least, you know, it wasn't this dark cloud over it when he came out, and then he promised to open it up to do the briefings and all that. And then he has the conversation with Liza where it literally eviscerates just about everybody in the administration other than somebody called Donald Trump. And now he's out on his keister. The tabloids are having a field day with him going through the divorce, not being present for his child's birth here because he was at a jamboree with the president in West Virginia with the Boy Scouts, and how he was supported. And what we learned was the president said, go ahead, make the call here, let everybody know what you think. Before he had the call with Ryan Liza, reportedly the president knew what he was going to do, says it. When pressed on it, Huckabee has his back, and then 48 hours later, he's literally escorted off the premises. Is there a scintilla of you that feels bad for Scaramucci since he was doing the president's bidding?
Absolutely not. I don't think the president signed off on Scaramucci going out there and making a complete fool of himself. He embarrassed the institution of the presidency. He embarrassed the president. He embarrassed himself.
But isn't that pot meat kettle for the president to say that language, the vulgarity, heaven forbid.
But there's one big difference. Trump is elected by the people. Scaramucci is not. This guy, honestly, I'm surprised he lasted this long, to be honest with you.
It wasn't that long.
No, I'm surprised. After that, first of all, you're the communications director. A little hint. You're supposed to be a master at dealing with reporters. Us reporters dealing with campaign folks know if we have a relationship, I can trust Dominic. If you don't know me for sure, you better be damn careful what you say to me, because everything is on the record no matter what I say. So I agree with your assessment that Trump has got to listen. He's not a fool. He may be a showman, but he's not a fool, and he is out of options.
And let's talk about party politics on the Hill. Jeff Flake, hardly somebody will ever be considered some moderate, let alone a liberal here, Republican senator from Arizona. Listen to what he had to say this weekend about the state of his own party right now.
Just like Goldwater had felt in his time 56 years ago when he wrote the original Conscience of a Conservative, that the party had lost its way.
Lost its way. And to that end, Republicans look on the Hill, they see what the president's done to Sessions. They see what he did, name it, to Priebus here, also the head of their party, at least at the RNC. They look for New Yorkers who know, to a John Fassler, to say, you got to vote for this bill here. It might be unpopular in the district. Do it. He votes for it at political risk. President turns around 48 hours later and calls it a mean bill, and we can't make this thing law. Do Republicans have any reason to trust this president? I know the base is still with him, but for those folks who aren't in, 90-something% red districts, do they trust him at this point, or do they do more of what we saw, for example, with the sanctions, where they voted 90-some-odd% to force this president with a veto-proof majority? You sign or we'll embarrass you.
I think you're going to see more of the latter. That's why you do see stuff like coming out of the Wall Street Journal and the establishment mainstream media. Keep in mind, up until very recently, Donald Trump was a Democrat. He's given money to Democratic donors. I mean, this is still a man without an ideology, technically without a party. He became, and I may get thrown out of the party for saying this, but he became a Republican on the back of the birther movement. So, to call him a Republican, he's elected Republican president, but to say that he's the Republican establishment is very, very dangerous.
Really quick question before I lose you, before we have to hit the break on this one. If the following presented itself, Democrats came up with a new version of reforming the ACA, certainly not in keeping with the Freedom Party's idea to repeal the thing and whatever, and they get some of the moderate Republicans, but by and large, a lot of rank and file aren't on board with this. Is the president, to your last point, not really a principal Republican? He wants any deal, he'd take any deal? Is there a fear among Republicans that he doesn't care what he signs, he doesn't even know what's in it, he might go with the Democrats here if he'll get anything passed? More
today after the chaos that has ensued over the last 7 months than 7 months ago, absolutely. He needs a win. He needs a win.
Coming up next, we're going to take a look at something almost as chaotic as the White House. I'm talking about the attempts here at repeal and replace of Obamacare and where it might go from here, what the priorities are on the Hill, and the political fire they might be playing with. Stay with us.